40 years without a single complaint. That was the record Chef Delaney carried like a metal pinned to her chest. 40 years of feeding every species that passed through Station Orbital 9, and not one formal grievance had ever reached the administration office. She had mastered the calcium-heavy broths favored by the Mareshi, the ammonia-fermented grains beloved by the Paliki, and the sweet nectar desserts the Yanari could not live without. Her four arms moved through the kitchen like a conductor leading an orchestra, and every plate that left her station was a masterpiece. S.O. when her youngest server, a nervous Mareshi named Finn, walked into the kitchen holding a comment card. Delaney did not even look up from the sauce she was reducing. "Someone has a complaint," Finn said quietly. Delaney's upper left hand stopped stirring. Her lower right hand set down a ladle. She turned all four of her deep violet eyes toward Finn and said, "Read it." Finn swallowed and read aloud. "The food is fine. Good texture. Nice presentation. But do you have any hot sauce?" Silence filled the kitchen. Every cook stopped working. "Hot sauce," Delaney repeated slowly. "That is what it says, chef." Delaney walked out of the kitchen and into the grand commissary. The dining hall was enormous, built into the central ring of the station where artificial gravity held steady. Hundreds of beings sat at curved tables under soft lighting. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on the only human present, a broad-shouldered cargo hauler sitting alone in the corner, eating a plate of her signature 7-layer protein tranche. She approached his table. "You submitted a comment card." The human looked up. He had kind eyes and calloused hands. "Yes, ma'am. Name's Reggie Okafor. The food is really good. I just wondered if you had any hot sauce." "Define hot sauce." Reggie leaned back. "It's a condiment, made from peppers, capsicum peppers. You ferment them or mix them with vinegar. It adds heat to food." Delaney gestured at his plate. "The food is served at optimal thermal temperature, 42 degrees. I calibrated it myself." Reggie smiled politely. "Not that kind of heat. Spicy heat, like a burn on your tongue. A chemical heat." Delaney stared at him for a long moment. "You want your food to burn you?" "Yes, ma'am." "On purpose?" "Yes, ma'am." Delaney returned to her kitchen without another word. She pulled up the human dietary profile in the station database and found it embarrassingly incomplete. 3 pages. The Mareshi profile alone was 200 pages. The human file listed basic caloric needs, a note about lactose intolerance in some populations, and nothing else. No mention of capsaicin. No mention of any preference for chemical pain during meals. She dismissed Reggie's request as a personal oddity. Some species had individuals with unusual tastes. It meant nothing. Then the next transport ship docked. 14 humans came aboard over the following week. Dock workers, cargo handlers, a medical technician, and 2 engineers on a short-term contract. Every single one of them, within their first 3 meals at the Grand Commissary, asked the same question. "Oh, you have hot sauce?" Delaney watched from the kitchen window as a dock worker named Amara Diallo sat down with a plate of her 7-layer tranche. The same dish she had spent 6 months perfecting, and pulled a small red bottle from her jacket pocket. Amara unscrewed the cap and poured a thick, rust-colored liquid directly onto the top layer. Delaney gripped the windowsill with all 4 hands. Finn appeared beside her. "Chef, are you all right?" "She brought her own," Delaney whispered. "She brought her own sauce into my kitchen. Should I say something to her?" "No." Delaney watched Amara take a bite, close her eyes, and smile with what appeared to be genuine satisfaction. The same tranche that had earned Delaney a Culinary Excellence Award from the Orbital Gastronomic Society. The same dish that 3 Mareshi food critics had called transcendent. And this human had poured mystery liquid on it and was now happier than any diner Delaney had ever observed. Over the following days, Delaney noticed more bottles appearing. Small glass containers tucked into pockets and belt pouches. Red sauces, green sauces, dark brown pastes. The humans traded them with each other like currency. She overheard Reggie telling Amara that he had found a shop on the station's trade deck that sold something called sriracha, and Amara's face had lit up like she had been told her family was visiting that IT was a condiment. It should not have mattered this much, but clearly did. Delaney called an emergency kitchen meeting at the end of the week. Her entire staff gathered in the prep area. 12 Mareshi cooks, 3 Paliki pastry specialists, and 1 very confused Yanari dessert artist. "We have a problem," Delaney announced. "The humans want something called hot sauce. Every human on this station has asked for it. Some are smuggling their own supply into my dining hall." She paused. "This is unacceptable. Not because they want flavor. Every species wants flavor. It is unacceptable because they want something we do not provide, and I have never failed to provide for any species that eats in my commissary." She placed all 4 hands flat on the prep table. "I'm going to solve this. I'm going to understand what hot sauce is, why humans need it, and how we can serve it safely. And I'm going to do it before the next transport ship arrives." Finn raised a cautious hand. "Chef, what if it is dangerous?" Delaney looked at him with all 4 eyes. "Then we will find out exactly how dangerous. Tomorrow morning, we taste it." Finn turned pale and did not sleep well that night. 3 bottles sat on the stainless steel counter of Delaney's kitchen like unexploded bombs. She had purchased them from the station's trade market that morning, and the vendor, a retired human merchant who ran a small import stall, had grinned at her in a way she did not appreciate. The first bottle was tall and slim, filled with a thin red liquid. The label read "Classic Pepper Sauce, Mild." The second was a squat jar of thick, dark paste labeled "Fermented Chili, Medium Heat." The third was very small, barely the size of Delaney's thumb, sealed with black wax. Its label said only 2 words, "The Yendi." Below the text was a small drawing of a human skull. Delaney lined up her kitchen staff. 12 Mareshi cooks, 3 Paliki pastry specialists, and the Yanari dessert artist, who had positioned himself near the exit. "We are going to approach this scientifically," Delaney said. "Small doses. Controlled environment." "Finn, you volunteered." "I did not volunteer," Finn said. "You raised your hand yesterday." "That was a question." "It has been noted as volunteering." "Step forward." Finn stepped forward with the expression of someone walking toward an airlock. Delaney used a precision dropper to place exactly 1 drop of the mild sauce onto a ceramic tasting spoon. Finn looked at it. The drop was barely visible. It smelled slightly sharp, like vinegar mixed with something earthy. He touched it to his tongue. For exactly 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then Finn made a sound that no one in the kitchen had ever heard a Mareshi make. It was somewhere between a scream and a whistle. He dropped the spoon, grabbed his throat with both hands, and collapsed sideways into a stack of clean plates. His tongue swelled to twice its normal size. His eyes watered so badly that fluid ran down his face and pooled on the floor. The kitchen erupted. 2 cooks rushed to help him. The Yanari dessert artist fled through the exit. A Paliki named Gasser, who considered herself the toughest member of the staff, grabbed a second tasting spoon and said, "It cannot be that bad." She tried a microdose, less than half a drop. Gasser did not scream. Instead, she sat down very slowly on the floor, placed both hands over her face, and began to cry. She cried for 1 hour and 14 minutes without stopping. When she finally stood up, she looked at Delaney and said, "That is not food. That is an assault." A third cook, a senior Mareshi named Hallett, tried an even smaller amount. He fainted, clean and simple. One moment standing, the next moment horizontal. Nobody touched the medium paste. Nobody even looked at the bottle labeled the Yendi. Delaney sealed all 3 bottles in a hazard containment box and took them to her office. She spent the rest of the morning running a chemical analysis using the kitchen's molecular scanner. The results appeared on her screen, and she read them 3 times to make sure she was not misunderstanding. Capsaicin, the active compound in all 3 bottles. It did not actually damage tissue. It bound to pain receptors, the same receptors that detected burning heat and triggered them artificially. The tongue was not being harmed. It only believed it was being harmed. The brain received a signal that said, "You are on fire," and responded accordingly. She cross-referenced capsaicin with the Galactic toxin registry. It was classified as a Class 3 irritant, restricted on 11 worlds, prohibited in food service on 7 of them. One planet had classified it alongside tear gas. Humans ate it for fun. They had been eating it for over 9,000 years. Delaney sat in her office for a long time. Then she called Reggie and Amara. They sat across from her at a small table in the back of the kitchen. Delaney kept the hazard box between them like evidence in a trial. Why? She asked simply. Reggie shrugged. It tastes good. It triggers pain receptors. Yes. You know that it triggers pain receptors. Yes. That is part of why it tastes good. Delaney looked at Amara. And you? You carry a personal supply. Amara's expression softened. My grandmother grew Scotch bonnet peppers in her garden in Senegal. She made a sauce every summer. Every meal my family ate together had that sauce on the table. When I eat something with real heat, I am not just eating. I'm sitting at her table again. The kitchen was quiet. Delaney said nothing for a moment. So it is not just about the chemical, she said. No, Amara said. It is never just about the chemical. For humans, food is memory. And spice is one of the oldest memories we carry. Our ancestors used it to preserve meat before we had refrigeration. They traded it across oceans. Wars were fought over it. My grandmother's peppers can be traced back through a line of women growing the same plant for 200 years. Delaney leaned back. She understood food as craft, as science, as art, but food as ancestral identity, food that carried pain and pleasure in the same molecule. That was something she had never encountered in 40 years. She looked at the hazard box. She looked at Amara. I cannot serve this in my kitchen, she said. One drop put my best server on the floor for 6 hours. If a Paliki child got hold of that small bottle, it could be lethal. Amara nodded. I understand, but I also cannot ignore it. You are part of this station now. Your food is part of this station. Delaney stood up. I need to speak with the station administrator. This is beyond my kitchen. She picked up the hazard box with 2 hands and tucked a data pad under her third arm. With her fourth hand, she straightened her chef's collar. Do not bring any more bottles in my dining hall until this is resolved, she said. Please. Amara smiled. No promise, chef. Delaney sighed with all 4 lungs and walked out. Station Administrator Vorlin had held his position for 11 years without a crisis. He was a Paliki, tall, thin, with gray-blue skin that shifted color slightly when he was stressed. Right now, his skin was almost white. Let me understand this correctly, he said, sitting behind his enormous desk. The humans are consuming a class 3 irritant, openly, in the shared dining facility. Delaney placed the hazard box on his desk. They are also smuggling personal supplies onto the station. How did this get past customs? Capsaicin is not restricted on human register vessels. It is classified as a food product under Earth trade law. Vorlin's skin shifted another shade paler. A food product, a substance that is classified alongside chemical deterrents on 7 worlds, is a food product. Correct. Vorlin stood up and walked to his window. The view overlooked the station's central atrium, where beings of 30 different species moved through corridors and market stalls. He watched a group of humans walking together near the lower level, laughing about something. One of them was carrying a small bottle in her hand, passing it to the woman beside her. Ban it, Vorlin said. Effective immediately. No capsaicin products in any public dining area. No personal bates. Full confiscation at customs. Delaney hesitated. Administrator, I am not sure that is the correct approach. Chef, 1 drop of that substance hospitalized your server. If a Paliki child ingested a concentrated dose, it could cause respiratory failure. This is a public safety issue. He was not wrong. Delaney knew he was not wrong. But something about Amara's story about her grandmother sat in her mind. Like a stone, she could not move. Word of the ban reached the human community within hours. There were only 31 humans on Station Orbital. 9, a small group compared to the thousands of Mareshi and Paliki residents. They gathered in the common room of their housing block that evening, and the mood was quiet and heavy. Reggie sat on a bench near the back, turning his last bottle of hot sauce in his hands. It was nearly empty, a gift from his sister on Earth, sent with his last supply shipment. He had been rationing it for weeks that a community forum was scheduled the next day. Vorlin attended personally, flanked by 2 security officers and a public health advisor. The meeting room was packed. Mareshi, Paliki, Yanari, and the small cluster of humans filled every seat. Vorlin spoke first. He was measured and professional. He presented the chemical data. He showed images of Finn's swollen tongue. He referenced the Galactic toxin registry. His argument was clean and logical. A Class 3 irritant had no place in a shared dining environment. Public safety required its removal. Reggie raised his hand. Administrator, capsaicin is harmless to humans. It causes a pain response, but no actual tissue damage. We have been eating it for thousands of years. Vorlin shook his head. Mr. Okafor, a substance that causes pain, swelling, tears, and in some species respiratory distress, cannot be classified as harmless simply because your species has a tolerance for it. A Mireshi council member stood up. One drop put Finn in the medical bay for 6 hours. 6 hours. From one drop of the mild variety. The humans shifted uncomfortably. They were outnumbered, and the room was not on their side. Then Amara stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue with the data. She looked at Vorlin and said, "You are right that capsaicin is dangerous to most species on this station. I do not dispute that. What I dispute is the assumption that banning it is the only solution." She paused and looked around the room. Every species in this room has foods that are toxic to other species. That is not an opinion. It is a chemical fact. She pointed toward the Mireshi section. Mireshi calcium broths contain concentrations of calcium carbonate that would cause kidney failure in Paliki within hours. She turned to the Paliki section. Paliki ammonia-fermented grain produces fumes that corrode Mireshi gill plates over time. Long-term exposure causes permanent damage. The room went very quiet. Yanari nectar desserts, Amara continued, contain a compound that acts as a powerful narcotic to at least 3 species on this station. It is served every evening without restriction. She looked back at Vorlin. You do not ban these foods. You serve them in designated sections with appropriate handling. You manage the risk. You do not eliminate the culture. Vorlin's skin had shifted to a deep gray. He opened his mouth, closed it, and sat down. The public health advisor leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Vorlin's expression tightened. Whatever the advisor had said, it had confirmed something he did not want confirmed. The meeting ended without a formal resolution. Vorlin said he would take the matter under review. The humans filed out quietly. The Mireshi council members avoided eye contact with each other. The Paliki delegates walked in silence. Delaney waited until the room was nearly empty. Then she approached Amara near the door. That was well said, Delaney told her. Amara looked tired. It should not have needed saying. Every species on this station is already feeding poison to someone. We're just the only ones who put a skull on the bottle. Delaney almost laughed. Almost. I have an idea, the chef said. Come to my kitchen tomorrow morning. Bring Reggie. And bring that bottle your grandmother would have been proud of. Amara studied her face for a moment. Then she nodded. Delaney had never built anything in her kitchen that she could not taste. That was about to change. She presented her proposal to Vorlin the morning after the forum. A dedicated human flavor station inside the Grand Commissary, physically separated from a main dining area by sealed walls and its own air filtration system, so that capsaicin vapors could not reach other diners. Separate utensils, separate storage, separate ventilation. Hazard labels on every surface. Warning lights at every entrance in 6 languages. Vorlin studied the blueprints on his data pad. You want to build a containment zone for food. I want to build a kitchen within a kitchen, Delaney corrected. It is not containment. It is specialization. The council will ask why we are spending resources on 31 people. 31 people today. More humans arrive every month. The cargo routes through this sector are expanding. In 2 years, there may be 200. In 5 years, 1,000. We can either plan for them or pretend they are not coming. Vorlin approved the project reluctantly. Construction took 10 days. Delaney oversaw every detail herself, from the placement of the ventilation ducts to the thickness of the glass separating the human flavor station from the main commissary. She tested the air seals personally, standing on the Mireshi side while Amara opened a jar of crushed peppers inside the sealed section. Not a single molecule reached Delaney's side. Then came the part that frightened her. She asked Amara and Reggie to teach her. They arrived the next morning with a crate. Inside were dried peppers of every shape and color. Long red ones, small round orange ones, wrinkled brown ones that looked like they had survived a fire. There were jars of paste, bags of powder, bottles of oil infused with seeds that floated like tiny grenades. Reggie laid them out on the counter with the care of a man handling precious metals. "This is a cayenne," he said, holding up a thin red pepper. "Medium heat. Good for sauces and marinades." He picked up a small, wrinkled pepper the color of rust. "This is a habanero. Much hotter. Fruity flavor underneath the heat." He pointed at a tiny, pale pepper at the end of the row. "And that is a ghost pepper. Do not touch it without gloves. Do not touch your eyes after touching it. Do not even think about it too hard." Delaney stood behind the glass partition, watching through the sealed window. She could not enter the preparation area. Even the fumes from cutting a habanero had made her eyes water through 2 layers of filtration during testing. She operated through the intercom, directing Amara and Reggie like a conductor who could hear the music but never touch the instruments. "Slice the cayenne lengthwise," she instructed. "Remove the seeds and membrane. That is where most of the capsaicin concentrates, yes." "Yes, chef," Amara said, smiling. "Good. Now char it. Light char only. I want the sugars to caramelize without destroying the volatile compounds." Over the next 2 weeks, Delaney studied capsaicin the way she had once studied Mureshi calcium crystallization and Paliki fermentation chemistry. She could not taste anything she created, but she understood the molecular structure. She knew how heat interacted with fat, how acid cut through capsaicin's binding to pain receptors, how fermentation deepened flavor while reducing sharpness. She built dishes the way an architect builds a house, by understanding the forces involved, even if she could never live inside it. Her first creation was a chili oil drizzle for her signature grain bowl. Slow-infused oil with 3 varieties of dried pepper, a hint of garlic, and toasted sesame. Reggie tested it and went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Chef, this is better than anything I have had since I left Earth." Next came a slow-roasted pepper glaze for protein strips, habanero and honey, reduced over low heat for 4 hours until it became a thick, amber sauce that smelled like smoke and sweetness. Amara tasted it and her eyes filled with tears, not from the heat, but from something deeper. "It tastes like home," she said. That Delaney's greatest achievement came last. She worked with Reggie to cultivate capsicum plants in a sealed greenhouse module on the station's agricultural deck. Station-grown peppers adapted to hydroponic conditions, producing a clean, bright heat that Reggie said reminded him of the peppers his uncle grew in Lagos. From these, Delaney engineered a fermented hot sauce, a proper, living condiment with depth and complexity. The first test dinner was held on a quiet evening. 12 humans sat in the human flavor station while Delaney watched from behind the glass. She had prepared 5 courses, each incorporating capsaicin in different ways. A spice soup, a pepper-glazed protein, a chili oil grain bowl, a fermented vegetable side with her house-made sauce, and a dessert with a ghost pepper caramel that Reggie had called insane but beautiful. The reactions were immediate. A cargo pilot named Aoife put down her spoon after the first course and pressed her hand to her chest. "I have not eaten food like this in 3 years," she said. A young engineer named Priya ate the entire pepper-glazed protein in silence and then asked for seconds with her voice breaking. An older dock worker named George simply closed his eyes and did not open them for a very long time. Reggie found Delaney at the window afterward. His eyes were red. He spoke quietly through the intercom. "My mother used to make a pepper stew. Every Sunday. The whole house smelled like it. Your glaze tastes almost exactly like it. I have not had anything close in 4 years." Delaney placed her hand against the glass. She could not smell what she had cooked. She could not taste it. She could not even be in the same room as it. But she had fed something that went beyond the tongue. She had fed memory. She had fed belonging that in 40 years of cooking, she had never been prouder of a meal she could not eat. News traveled fast on a space station. It traveled even faster when food was involved. Within 3 weeks, the human flavor station had become the most talked about thing on Orbital 9. Human crews from passing cargo ships began scheduling their docking rotations to include a meal at Delaney's sealed kitchen. A freighter captain named Bola rerouted her entire supply run by 2 days just to eat the pepper-glazed protein. A mining crew from the Outer Belt sent a formal request asking if Delaney could ship her fermented hot sauce to their outpost. The station's internal newsletter ran a feature on it. The Mareshi food critics who had once praised Delaney's 7-layer tranche now wrote about a kitchen they could never enter and food they could never taste. One critic called it the most important culinary development on the station in a decade. Another called it proof that great cooking transcends the cook's own senses. Delaney did not let it go to her head. She expanded the menu slowly, testing every dish through Amara and Reggie before serving it. She maintained strict protocols. 3 locked doors between the human flavor station and the main commissary. Air filtration running at maximum. Warning signs in 6 languages. A decontamination mat at every exit so that no capsaicin residue left the sealed area on shoes or clothing. Everything was working perfectly. Then Serene happened. Serene was 15 years old, Paliki, and possessed the specific combination of curiosity and stupidity that defined teenagers across every known species. His friends dared him to sneak into the human flavor station. They had watched videos of humans eating peppers and laughing, and Serene wanted to prove that the warnings were exaggerated. He was convinced that the adults were being dramatic. He waited until the dinner rush, when the kitchen staff was focused on service. The first locked door required a key card, which Serene had borrowed from a cleaning drone's charging station. The second door had a biometric scanner, but it had been propped open by a delivery crate that had not yet been moved inside. The third door was a simple push-bar emergency exit. Serene walked into the human flavor station like he had discovered a hidden world. Shelves of bottles and jars lined the walls. The air was warm and smelled strange, sharp and sweet at the same time. He walked along the counter, reading labels he did not understand. Then he saw it. The small bottle sealed with black wax. The one labeled the Yendi with the skull drawing. It was sitting on a high shelf in a locked glass case, but the case had been left open during inventory. Serene picked it up. It was so small. How bad could it be? He broke the wax seal, unscrewed the cap, and took a full mouthful. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Serene's body made a decision on his behalf. His throat swelled shut. His secondary respiratory membrane, a Paliki organ designed to filter toxic atmospheres, locked down completely. His eyes rolled back. He hit the floor with a sound that brought every human in the dining area to their feet. Amara reached him first. She had been eating at a nearby table and heard the crash. She found Serene on the floor, his gray-blue skin turning white, his chest heaving but no air getting through. She recognized the symptoms immediately. Capsaicin binding to Paliki mucous membranes, causing a cascading inflammatory response. She rolled him onto his side, keeping his airway as open as possible. Then she turned to the nearest human and shouted, "Get the medical kit from the wall. The calcium gluconate spray. The green canister." Now, the spray was there because Delaney had insisted on it. Every possible allergic and toxic reaction had been planned for. The medical kit contained species-specific treatments for accidental capsaicin exposure. Amara had read the emergency protocol on her second day eating in the flavor station. She sprayed the calcium gluconate directly onto Serene's tongue and the back of his throat. The compound neutralized the capsaicin binding, and within 30 seconds, the swelling began to reduce. By the time the station medical team arrived, Serene was breathing again. His eyes were open and streaming with tears. He looked terrified. Amara sat beside him on the floor, holding his hand, until the medics loaded him onto a stretcher. The fallout was immediate. Vorlin shut down the human flavor station within the hour. Security sealed the doors. The bottles, the jars, the fermented sauce that Delaney had spent weeks perfecting, all of it locked behind hazard tape. The council convened an emergency session the next morning. Vorlin stood at the front of the chamber, his skin pale with fury. A 15-year-old boy nearly died in a dining facility from a food product. Delaney stood before the council and took full responsibility. The flavor station was my proposal. The safety protocols were my design. I accept whatever consequences the council determines. But then she placed a data pad on the table. However, I want the council to review the security logs. She activated the display. 3 locked doors. Serene bypassed the first with a stolen keycard. The second was propped open by a delivery crate. A maintenance failure, not a design failure. The third was an emergency exit that opens from the inside by regulation. He also ignored 4 warning signs, 2 of which included graphic images of medical emergencies in Paliki script. She looked at Vorlin. Every protocol was followed. Every safeguard was in place. A teenager deliberately circumvented all of them. Reggie stood next. On Earth, children accidentally eat dangerously hot peppers regularly. It happens every year. Our response is not to ban peppers from the planet. Our response is to teach children. He placed his own data pad on the table. I have drafted an educational program. Species-specific food safety training for every resident of the station. Not just for capsaicin. For every dietary hazard that exists in every kitchen on Orbital 9. Because right now, most people on the station have no idea what foods from other species could hurt them. Serene did not know because nobody told him. The council sat in silence. Vorlin stared at the security footage playing on the display. A 15-year-old boy opening 3 doors that were supposed to be closed, reaching for a bottle that was supposed to be locked, and swallowing something that every sign on every wall told him not to touch. "We will take it under review," Vorlin said quietly. Delaney walked out of the chamber and found Amara waiting in the corridor. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "You saved his life," Delaney finally said. "Your emergency kit saved his life," Amara replied. "I just knew where it was. Because you read the protocol. Because you wrote a good one." They stood together in silence, watching the sealed doors of the flavor station at the end of the corridor. Dark, locked, empty. The council debated for 3 days. Voices rose and fell behind closed doors. Proposals were drafted, rejected, rewritten, and rejected again. Delaney was not allowed inside the chamber, so she waited in her kitchen and cooked food she did not need to cook, because that was what she did when she could not control anything else. That on the second day, Serene's written statement arrived that IT was short and honest, the way only a teenager who had genuinely frightened himself could be. He admitted he had stolen the keycard. He admitted he had seen the warning signs and ignored every one of them. He admitted his friends had dared him, and he had been too proud to say no. He wrote that the moment the sauce touched his tongue, he knew he had made the worst decision of his life. He wrote that the human woman who stayed with him on the floor and held his hand while he could not breathe was the bravest person he had ever met, and he was sorry for what he had caused. His parents, who had initially demanded the permanent closure of the flavor station, read Reggie's educational proposal on the second evening. His mother, a senior Paliki botanist, spent an hour reviewing the curriculum. She found it thorough, practical, and honest. She changed her position publicly the next morning, standing before the council and saying that her son's near-death experience was not caused by human food, it was caused by ignorance. And ignorance, she said, was cured by education, not by walls. That on the third day, Vorlin called Delaney and Reggie into his office. He looked tired. His skin was the dull gray of a Paliki who had not slept enough. He sat behind his desk and placed his hands flat on the surface. "I am reopening the human flavor station," he said. With conditions. The conditions were significant. Enhanced biometric security on all 3 doors. No more key cards. No more propped open delivery entrances. A mandatory food safety orientation for every resident of the station, updated annually. An emergency medical protocol visibly posted in every dining section, not just the human one. And Reggie's educational program, fully funded, covering dietary hazards for all species. All species, Vorlin repeated. Not just humans. That last condition changed everything. When a full dietary hazard audit was conducted, the results spread through the station like a shockwave. The Mareshi calcium broths that were served every day in the main commissary contained calcium carbonate levels that could cause acute kidney failure in Paliki within 6 hours of concentrated exposure. The data had been available for years. Nobody had flagged it. The Paliki ammonia-fermented grain, a staple served at breakfast and lunch, produced fumes that slowly corroded Mireshi gill plates. Long-term Mireshi residents of the station had been reporting increased respiratory sensitivity for over a decade. The cause had been attributed to air quality. It was the breakfast grain. The Inari nectar desserts, universally beloved and served without restriction, contained a compound that functioned as a powerful narcotic for at least 3 other species on the station. A Mireshi dockworker had been quietly addicted to it for 2 years and had never understood why. Every kitchen on Station Orbital 9 had been serving someone else's poison. For years. Without labels. Without warnings. Without sealed rooms, or air filtration, or emergency medical kits on the walls. The only species that had put a skull on the bottle was humanity. Delaney reopened the human flavor station on a quiet Tuesday morning. But she did not call it that anymore. Above the entrance, in clean lettering visible from across the commissary, a new name glowed softly. The Open Flame. She expanded it. The sealed section now had 4 compartments. One for human capsaicin cuisine, one for Mireshi high-calcium preparations, one for Paliki ammonia ferments, and one for Yanari nectar products. Each compartment had its own ventilation, its own safety protocols, its own emergency kits tailored to every species that might accidentally wander in. Warning signs in 12 languages. Educational displays built into the walls that IT was not a containment zone. It was a celebration that on opening night, Delaney stood inside the human compartment for the first time. She wore a specially designed breathing mask that filtered capsaicin molecules and protective lenses over all 4 eyes. She could stay for 10 minutes before the exposure would begin to irritate her skin. She used every second. She watched humans eat food she had created. She watched them laugh and cry and argue about which sauce was better. She watched Reggie pour her station-grown fermented hot sauce over a bowl of grain and close his eyes like a man returning to a place he thought he had lost forever. Then she stepped out through the sealed door, removed her mask, and walked to the observation window. Amara was still inside, seated at a small table. Delaney had prepared her a special dish, the hottest thing she had ever engineered. A habanero and ghost pepper reduction, slow-cooked for 8 hours, layered over grilled vegetables from the station greenhouse. It was by every chemical measurement Delaney could calculate, extraordinarily painful. Amara took the first bite. Tears ran down her face immediately. Not delicate tears, real ones, streaming from both eyes, dripping off her jaw. Her nose ran. Her lips swelled slightly. Her hand shook. She was smiling. The biggest, most open, most genuine smile Delaney had ever seen on any face of any species. Delaney pressed the intercom button. "Is it good?" Amara laughed through her tears, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked up at the window. "Chef, it is perfect." Delaney stood there for a long time after Amara finished eating. The kitchen was emptying. The lights dimmed automatically as the dinner service ended. Through the glass, she could see the empty plates, the used napkins, the ring of condensation from a water glass that someone had gripped tightly during the ghost pepper reduction. She had never tasted a single bite of her most famous creation. She could not enter the room where it was served without protective equipment. The food she had become known for across 3 sectors was, to her own body, a chemical weapon, and she had never been prouder of anything she had cooked in her entire life. She turned off the kitchen lights with her upper left hand, straightened her collar with her lower right, and walked home through the quiet corridors of Station Orbital 9, where every kitchen now had warning signs, every dining hall had emergency kits, and every species finally knew the truth, that the most honest cooks in the galaxy were the ones who had always put a skull on the bottle.